Welcome to the On the Pen podcast with your host, Dave Knapp.
Generic GLP-1s for obesity hit the market. Wegovy is breaking barriers in liver disease, and Eli Lilly just actually killed off one of their oral pipeline obesity medications. We're going to get into it all this week in obesity medicine. Feels like the ground is shifting underneath our feet. Welcome to the On the Pen podcast. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, man on the Manjaro. That's why I am here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Manjaro, Zepbound, Compound, that pen. And if you're new here, welcome. We cover obesity medicine news from the patient perspective each and every week on this podcast as we run down the latest news that empowers you to have more competent and confident conversations with your medical providing team. Hit the like, hit the bell, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you get all the updates for this channel. And if you're listening on the podcast, please drop us a 5-star rating and review. It trains the algorithm to let the rest of the world know that the content that we're making here at On the Pen is worthwhile and other people ought to check it out too. So welcome. Let's get into some news this week. It didn't really feel like news to me when it came out. News broke this past week that Teva Pharmaceuticals was granted the ability to manufacture and sell generic liraglutide. Now I thought, am I crazy or did this happen like a year ago? Well, it did, but it happened for Victoza, which is the generic version of the diabetes version of liraglutide. This one was for Saxenda, which is actually designated for obesity. So digging into this a little bit, you would think that the first generic obesity GLP-1 medicine hitting the market would be an absolute game changer for patients. But the reality is it won't. The wholesale cost of this generic version of liraglutide is over $1,100. That's literally more than double the out-of-pocket cash pay price currently for Zepbound and Wegovy, both far superior medications if you're going by the clinical trials. In contrast, Victoza, which is now available in generic form, liraglutide from the same manufacturer, can actually be bought for like $200 to $300 right now. So you might say, well, why would anyone pay for the higher dose of liraglutide if liraglutide was the drug that their doctor and they decided on? Well, the biggest reason is that the diabetes version of liraglutide goes up to 1.8 milligrams per day, whereas the obesity indication goes up to almost 2-3 milligrams, which is almost around double what the daily dose of the diabetes version. So it's twice the medicine. I don't know if that's how they justify it, but if you look at the branded versions of liraglutide, Victoza and Saxenda, the diabetes version is right around $500. And the obesity version is up there over into the thousands. And so while many are calling this a breakthrough on the surface, it's pretty meaningless. This isn't access for patients. This means very little. I don't expect the cost of this medication to come down in a meaningful way, and I really don't expect anybody to be on it. How they're selling over $100 million worth of this stuff a year now in a world where Wegovy and Ozempic and Manjaro and Zepbound exist, frankly, is crazy to me. This would be more appropriately priced in the $100 range, maybe even the $50 range when you consider how much more effective something like Zepbound is at $500 a month. You're looking at Victoza, Saxenda, the obesity version, where patients lose around 9% of their body weight on average. And you're looking at Zepbound, which is over twice as effective in the weight loss category, up towards 22% of the body weight lost over the 72-week period. And so if you have ever been denied coverage for GLP-1s and you were hoping that the generic versions were going to bring that price down right away, unfortunately, that is just not the case. It's insane to me what's going on here, but that is the reality. Now, if you are somebody who has been looking at the potential of starting a GLP-1 medication and you just aren't sure where to start, perhaps you've seen some of the news articles floating around this past week about Serena Williams becoming a Roe member and getting on Zepbound to help manage her weight issues that she's had. Roe has a great program called the Roe Body Program. You can check it out at roe.co/OTP. And you'll learn a little bit about how patients using the Roe Body Program couple these medications with lifestyle modifications and lose 15 to 20% of their body weight in a year. You can check it out at roe.co/OTP. The great thing about Roe is you can get access to the cash pay Wegovy. You can get access to the cash pay Zepbound, the vials, and you can get them right from their platform. You never have to leave. If that's prescribed to you, it's just a very seamless process. Managing that, communicating with your medical team, all of that is super easy to do right there in the Roe app. And there's a lot more there, including treatments for hair loss, ED medications, other things that Roe offers. And I'm sure that will be ever expanding. So check out our partners at Roe. They bring the podcast to us each and every week. So thank you to Roe for being such a gracious and generous sponsor. You can check them out again at roe.co/OTP. In more exciting news, we'll bring the whole conversation up a level. This past week, Wegovy was approved for accelerated approval by the FDA in MASH. Now, MASH stands for metabolic dysfunction associated steatohepatitis. It used to be called NASH with an N, and I just grew up knowing it as fatty liver disease, right? But there's a whole spectrum that is caused by fatty liver that ultimately can lead to the end stage, which is cirrhosis, right? So he's talking about the spectrum here. And what we had here was the FDA granted accelerated approval for Wegovy for these sort of advancing versions of fatty liver disease, which is really exciting news for patients because it is the first GLP-1 therapy to be approved for MASH. So now we have another indication. Hopefully we'll see Medicare and Medicaid add on this indication as a reasonable use case for Wegovy. So that will expand access through those programs. And hopefully we'll see added insurance coverage as well in the private sector. So this is really exciting because when we talk about liver, we're talking about a whole host of issues in terms of metabolic health. And so helping to get rid of that liver disease is a really, really positive step in expanding, not only expanding accessibility, but in helping Americans achieve better health outcomes in general. So this is huge. There's a treatment now for MASH in terms of GLP-1. I think we'll ultimately see this for tirzepatide. We'll see this for retatrutide, especially the glucagon class, right? When we talk about retatrutide or mazdutide or survodutide, these are some of the peptides that are coming down the pike that include glucagon. That glucagon agonism really tends to rev up the metabolism in the liver and burns off that liver fat, even much more so than what we've seen with Wegovy. But seeing Wegovy get that indication is the first, you start to see how being the first to market with a medication with these specific indications is a huge advantage. And so I'm super excited for this, for patients to see expanded access to Wegovy. Now, if you know somebody who has liver disease, this is the podcast to send them to, because you want them to be aware that this is an indication now, this is the news, and this is empowering you to have more competent and confident conversations with your doctors. Now, on the heels of this really exciting Wegovy news was some more really exciting Wegovy news, but we really need to dissect this one a little bit. So it's interesting because we saw Novo Nordisk release some data this past weekend, and the headline basically reads that Novo Nordisk says that Wegovy users had a 57% lower risk of heart attack, stroke, or death versus tirzepatide in users that had obesity and cardiovascular disease. Now, that is an astounding number to look at, a 57% lower risk of heart attack versus patients using tirzepatide. Now, you're going to look at that and you're going to go, how does this all work? Well, let's break down this trial and let's point to some other things that I think are a reason to not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. So the follow-up here was short. It was around 4 months. So this is an observational study. This is not a placebo-controlled, double-blind clinical trial. This is observational data of the real world of patients' records, and basically patients reporting data to their doctor, and then Novo's sort of taking that, and I think, in fairness, cherry picking data that sort of fits their narrative. So the population excludes diabetics. So it's not generalizable to many real patients. It's just kind of sort of a broad swath of people. The 57% benefit only showed up in people who never missed doses. And once you included treatment gaps, it actually dropped to 29%. It wasn't randomized. It was retrospective. So because we're looking at data, even with matching, bias can linger here. So it suggests that semaglutide may have a unique heart protective edge, but Novo calling it proof is definitely marketing spin. So real patients in the real world miss dosages. They face shortages. Their insurance causes them to switch drugs. There's insurance interruptions. There's dosing issues. The study isn't idealized to reflect that so much. So the big thing that I want to say here is that the short follow-up time is not near long enough to look at a cardiovascular outcomes trial when you consider that Wegovy's, Novo Nordisk's own trial with Wegovy, the select trials were 3 years long. And then we just saw the surpass cardiovascular outcomes, which compared tirzepatide to dulaglutide in an Eli Lilly trial. And that was a 4-year study. So you really need time to really tell the full story of how a drug is going to positively or negatively impact somebody's likelihood of having a major cardiovascular event. So one of the things that I want to say in addition to this is that it is data. It is a point of data. It is worth looking at. It's definitely worth asking questions about. But one of the things that we covered just a few weeks ago was the fact that there was a recent study out of the UK taking a look at exenatide. Now, exenatide is it's the OG of the OG. It's the one that came from Gila monster venom originally, right? It was a peptide isolated from Gila monster venom that they found was helpful at lowering blood sugar because the peptide very closely mimicked the natural GLP-1 produced in the human body. Now, this study looked at exenatide, and what they found was exenatide, the GLP-1 receptor agonist, there's no GIP in this one. It's just straight GLP-1, like liraglutide and semaglutide and dulaglutide. Those are our existing drugs on the market that are just straight GLP-1, because as you may know, tirzepatide, Zepbound Mounjaro is GIP, GLP-1. And actually it's 5-to-1 is a ratio that I've been told by people that know a lot more than me about chemistry, but 5-to-1. So it's more a GIP medication than GLP-1. Perhaps why you didn't see a massive separation in the trial that they did, the cardiovascular outcomes trial between dulaglutide and tirzepatide. Because ultimately what this study out of the UK showed, and you can get more about this at obesity.news. We've got the full article. I'll link it in the show notes. But essentially what it showed is that the GLP-1 receptor agonism actually opened up channels in the cells, which allowed blood flow to damaged hearts after a heart attack. And so there were specific things, like almost like a lock and key, that the GLP-1 receptor agonism opened up these channels in these cells to allow blood flow back to parts of the heart where otherwise doctors had struggled previously to get blood flow to return to specific parts of the heart. And they also found that the inverse was true. So they took exenatide, and there's a version of it where they can sort of change the molecule and block GLP-1 receptors. They blocked those GLP-1 receptors on the heart and got the opposite reaction. So there may be something very specific and very unique about the GLP-1 molecule specifically that may be special in how it protects the heart, right? So we're not talking about weight loss here, because even in the select trials for Wegovy, which Novo Nordisk ran, again, a 3-year-long trial looking at cardiovascular outcomes, the cardiac benefit and the reduction in all-cause mortality was really independent of how much weight loss somebody had. It was really the molecule that seemed to show that it had cardioprotective benefits. So could there be a cardiac benefit of GLP-1 receptor agonism that does not necessarily exist until we see it, proven in similar ways with tirzepatide GIP? So I don't know if you tracked with me. This is a very in the weeds topic, but I think it's very important because millions of Americans live with cardiovascular disease, with heart failure, and all of these conditions are definitely important to take this study back to your doctor and say, what do you think? Because I don't think that this independent, or this, I say independent, but I just mean this one study from Novo Nordisk is enough to go, hey, doc, because of my heart issues, should I switch from tirzepatide to semaglutide? But when you look at the bigger picture, it is possible, and my mind remains open, again, as not as a medical professional, but just as a layperson who is in the weeds on this stuff, maybe more than just about anybody in the world, that these GLP-1 medications may possess some specific qualities that are cardiac protective that you may not see over other incretin or nutrient stimulated hormones like GIP or like glucagon. Other benefits for sure, right? We're not knocking GIP because of obviously more effective weight loss is what we've seen in clinical trials. We've seen a reduction of diabetes by like 94% in pre-diabetics with tirzepatide. We've seen amazing things from GIP. But with this specific thing, it's definitely worth a conversation with your doctor if you're somebody living with heart failure or heart disease to say, is there possible benefit here that there may not be over here? Just worth a conversation with your doctor. And if your overall health and measuring your health is something that's important to you, I have introduced you over the last couple of weeks to an amazing product and now a sponsor of our program here, our podcast here at On the Pen, Shape-A, the Shape-A scale. This little guy right here is an amazing numberless scale. Now, I don't know how it is for you, but my brain has been wired and rewired over and over again to hate the scale. If I know that I'm gaining weight, I don't get on it because I know that I can have a diet one day that may lead to a 10-pound change on the scale tomorrow. And that change, that one simple change in the scale, even though on an intellectual level, I know that I haven't gained 10 pounds in a day, the mental toll that it takes on somebody who is entrenched in the process of trying to control their weight can be a real mind mess up for me. You know what word I'm trying to avoid here, but it really messes with the mind. The Shape-A scale somehow undoes all of that by getting you to zoom out and look at patterns instead of numbers. So instead of shooting for a number on the scale, I'm shooting for a color range that is going to be a 10-day average of what my weight and my body composition is doing, which allows me to zoom out from those day-to-day fluctuations and see where am I at over the long term. The Shape-A scale has been an absolute game changer for me. I'm at my lowest weight ever on a GLP-1, and they're offering a 30% off discount to listeners of On the Pen. Just use code OTP30. It's going to save you 30% off of this scale. For those of you who struggle with the scale, but understand the importance of metrics, this is a really important tool and a really interesting approach to long-term weight management. I love this scale. I was so excited to be able to bring this to you as a sponsor. So check out myShape-A.com. Use code OTP30 to save 30% on your Shape-A scale. Now, this is a story that I haven't seen covered really anywhere but on the Pen. I think it's starting to get out there today a little bit. Eli Lilly dropped 2 mid-stage studies on another oral small molecule. Now, if that phrase oral small molecule GLP-1 stands out to you, it's because that's what we've been talking about a ton lately, orforglipron. Orforglipron is the next GLP-1 pill to hit the market that is not semaglutide, right? It's really exciting because it should hit the market sometime in early 2026. And orforglipron has the ability to be a once daily pill that really, unlike semaglutide, which is a peptide, is a small molecule. So it's metabolized in the liver, kind of like aspirin or acetaminophen is. Your liver processes it, whereas the peptides aren't processed that way, right? The peptides are going to be sort of absorbed in your stomach and in your intestines, and these work differently. So when you take oral semaglutide, there's a lot of rules about how you can take it because otherwise the peptide just gets destroyed by your stomach acid. Small molecules give you the benefit of having it metabolized in the liver, but because they have that benefit, there are also potential issues with liver toxicity. And we don't see that the same way with peptides. My concern with orforglipron has always been, if you look at other companies that have tried to develop small molecule GLP-1s, Pfizer being the big one, danuglipron was something that they had to completely abandon mid-stage because of liver damage, right? And so what you saw in phase 3 was Lilly really wanted to avoid any potential signals with liver. It came up on every earnings call. Everybody was asking about it. And they pulled the high dose from 45 milligrams in the phase 2 trials down to 36 milligrams at the high dose in the phase 3 trials. And my concern for patients long term is what we've seen patients do. All you have to do is a cursory search on Reddit to see that people are taking more than they've been prescribed. If that happens with these small molecules, there are specific potential issues that may exist for patients that don't exist with the peptides. So for that reason, I am curious. Naperiglipron is the name of this small molecule GLP-1 that Lilly dropped this past week. Again, 2 phase 2 trials. They just dropped them. They were having a hard time enrolling patients, from what I hear. But I am curious if that was a liver signal. I don't know if we'll ever know, but were there liver signals in naperiglipron? I hope somebody asks Eli Lilly on their next earnings call if that played into it, because I do worry about people taking more than they're supposed to take of the orforglipron. Now, people could do that with any medicine, and you can argue that, but I don't think that people understand the potential issues the way they would with because they're conditioned the same way to understand how peptides work. And these are not peptide drugs. They're small molecule metabolized in the liver. So I think that it's extremely important for people who will be perhaps drawn to orforglipron for no other reason than I think it will be priced cheap. Cheaper than perhaps you see the price point of the injectable incretins, and that cheap nature or cheaper nature of the drug will cause people to try to get more efficacy by taking more than they should, and that concerns me. Is it a reason to not take orforglipron? That is a conversation for you and your doctor to have. I don't think so based upon the clinical trial data, but what I do worry about is people taking too much. And so I'm curious to know if this naperiglipron was a liver signal, or whether this was just they couldn't enroll enough people because it wasn't potent enough. I do believe there's still one other maybe trial going on, but don't quote me on that. So 2 big trials dropped this past week by Eli Lilly in a mid-stage obesity medicine candidate called naperiglipron. If you have struggled to get access to your GLP-1 medications, I hope that you check out our partners at Claimable, another sponsor of the podcast here. Claimable helps you fight the insurance denials for your Zepbound, right? So one of the things that people don't understand about insurance companies and how they work here is that insurance companies are always working to basically deny you of your medication, because they know that 90% of medication denials in this country are not fought. They're literally banking on you not fighting an insurance prior authorization denial. Claimable comes in on the back end. They help you build a medical case, a legal case, and then they help you fire that off to all the interested parties, whether it's your employer, your insurance company, your doctor, everybody who needs to get that denial or a copy of it. Even legislators will get a copy of that. And so I hope that you'll check out Claimable at claimable.com, getclaimable.com/OTP. It's about $40 to fight this. But when you think about how much that could save you long-term on this medication, if you're able to get it covered, that is a huge, huge benefit. So getclaimable.com/OTP. Use code OTP10. It's going to save you 10% off of that 40% cost. But I'm hearing from patients within the On the Pen community almost every day that they are getting coverage for their medication once again. And some people are using it for even their non-GLP-1 medications. There's a whole host of medications that they'll help you fight prior authorizations on. Claimable is an amazing company, and I thank them for sponsoring the On the Pen podcast. So amazing week in obesity medicine. There's a lot more coming down this week. There's stuff that you're going to want to make sure you stay in contact with On the Pen. You can sign up for email alerts at obesity.news. We had some definite disappointment with the access in the generic liraglutide this week. That stuff should be priced super cheap, but it's not. So I don't anticipate that being the answer to expanding accessibility right now. Over time, we should see that come down, but seriously, $4.99 a month for the therapeutic doses of Zepbound, it just makes a no-brainer decision in my book. We saw that Wegovy The MASH approval is a really good thing, a positive thing. So we got a negative thing on accessibility, but we got a really positive thing, and helped you sort of bring some perspective to these headlines about Wegovy. So the fight is about whether patients are treated like people or profit margins. The fight continues. We will continue to fight that fight here at On the Pen. I hope that you found this podcast helpful today. If you did, would you hit that like, hit that bell, hit that sub for notifications? And again, leave a 5-star rating and review on the podcast. Lots of news coming up this upcoming week. This past week, we dropped a video that you may want to go check out. We had Tom Arnold, a new series we're called GLP-1 with the Stars, where we're hearing from YouTube stars. We're hearing from 90s sitcom stars. We got a lot of really fun stuff coming for you. So check out that video with Tom Arnold on the YouTube. Had a really interesting perspective from him on the disease of obesity and addiction. I hope that you'll check that out. Let me know what you thought about that in the comments. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being the best part of what we do at On the Pen. Until next week, we'll catch you on the next one.